Well, this in this transaction, I would have taken on both the debt and the risk, and I was paying for it. About a month later, we found a piece of land that was even more beautiful. It was 87 acres of tall oak trees with a stream, and it had a house on it for one $115,000. I offered the seller for full price if he would give me my trumps, and he did. To make a long story short, we spent a few dollars fixing the house and sold the house and 30 acres for $215,000 using the same idea of low down, easy monthly payment, all while keeping 57 acres for ourselves. This is what the transaction looked like on my balance sheet. Assets $215,000, liabilities $150,000. The new owner was thrilled because it was beautiful home and he was able to buy it for almost nothing down. As an insight, he also bought it through his company for use as a corporate retreat for his employee, which allowed him to depreciate the purchase price as a company asset as well as deduct the maintenance costs. This all in addition to being able to deduct the interest payment. His interest payment more than paid for my interest payment. A few years later, he sold some of his company's stock and paid off the loan to me. And I, in return, paid off my loan. The debt was gone. With the extra $100,000 profit I made, I was able to pay the taxes from the gain of the land and the house. The net result was zero debt, a few dollars profit, $15,000 after taxes, and 57 acres of gorgeous land. It was like getting paid for getting what you want. Today, my balance sheet from one transaction look like this: 57 acres, $15,000 cash. The IPO. An initial public offerings, the IPO, or taking a private company public through a stock offering, is based on the same principles while the words, the market, and the players are different. There are basic underlying principles that remain the same when my organization form a company to take public. We often create a value out of thin air, even though we try to base it on accurate opinion of the fair market value. We take the offering to the public market, and instead of being quite being sold to one person, it is sold to thousands of people as shares as a company. The value of experience. This is another reason I recommend people start in the B quadrant before proceeding to the I quadrant, regardless of whether the investment is in real estate, a business stock, or bonds. There is an underlying comprehensive business sense that is essential to being a sound investor. Some people have this comprehensive sense, but many do not, primarily because schools trains us to be highly specialized, not comprehensive trained. One more point for those thinking about starting to move over to the B or the I quadrant, I recommend starting small or taking your time, do bigger deals as your confidence grows and expensive experience grows. And remember, the only difference between an $80,000 and $800,000 is a zero. The process of going through small deals is much as the small as going through a much large multi-million dollar public offering. It's only a matter of more people, more zeros, and more fun. Once a person gain experience and a good reputation, it takes less and less money to create bigger and bigger investment. Many times it takes no money to make a lot of money. Why? Experience is valuable. As stated earlier, if you know how to make money with many people and money will flock to you, start small and take your time. Experience is more important than money. It is simple and easy. In theory, the numbers and transactions on the right side of the quadrant are the simple, regardless of whether we are talking about the stocks, bonds, or real estate or business. To be financially well off simply means being able to think differently, to think from different quadrants, and to have the courage to do things different. To me, one of the hardest thing a person who is new to this way of thinking has to go through is the countless number of people who will say to you, you can do that. If you can overcome that kind of limited thinking and seek out people who say to you, yes, I know how to do that, I'll be happy to teach you, your life will be easy. The law. I started this chapter with the Tax Reform Act of 1986. While that was a significant rule change, it is not and will not be the last rule change. I only use the 86 Act as an example of how powerful some rules and laws can be. If a person is to be successful on the B or the I side of the quadrant, he or she needs to be aware of market forces and any change in the law that affect those market forces. Today in America, there are more than 100,000 pages of tax code. That's for the IRS alone. The federal laws comes to more than 1.5 million pages of law. It would take the average reader 23,000 years to read the entire US code. Every year, more laws are created, deleted, and changed. It would be more than a full time job just to keep up with those changes. Every time someone tells me that against the law, I reply by asking them if they read every line of code in America. If they say yes, I leave slowly back up towards the door. Never turn your back on someone who thinks they know every law. To be successful on the right side of the quadrant requires seeing 5% with your eyes and 95% with your mind. Understanding the law and market forces is vital for financial success. Great transfer of wealth often occurs when laws and market change, so it is important to pay attention if you want to have those change work in your favor, not against you. The government needs your money. I believe in paying taxes. I know the government provides many important and vital services essential for a well-run civilization. Unfortunately, in my opinion, government is mismanaged, is too big, and has made too many promises it cannot keep. But it is not the fault of the politicians and lawmakers in office today, because most of the financial problems we face today were created more than 60 years ago by their predecessors. Today lawmakers are trying to handle the problem and to find solution. Unfortunately, if lawmakers want to stay in office, they cannot tell the masses the truth. If they did, they would be thrown out of the office, because the masses still rely on the government to solve their financial and medical problems for them. Government is getting smaller and the problem are getting bigger. In the meantime, government will have to continue to come after more taxes even if the politicians promise not to. That is why Congress passed the Tax Reform Act of 1986. It needed to plug a tax loophole in order to collect more in taxes. In the next few years, many of the Western government must begin to collect even more in taxes to prevent a default or some those promises made long ago. Promises made such as Medicare, care, social security, as well as federal pension due to millions of federal workers. A mass public realization will probably not occur now, but the magnitude of the problem will be apparent by 2010. The world will realize that the US will not be able to borrow its ways out of these problems. Forbes magazine ran Forbes magazine ran this projection about the escalating US debt. If you notice, it goes down until 2010 and then it zoom up just as the biggest group of people in the history of America begins to retire. In the year 2010, the first baby boomer turned 65. In the year 2010, instead of adding money to the stock market, baby boomer will begin withdraw money from the stock market. It's not If not earlier, by the year 2010, 75 million baby boomers will decided that their biggest asset, their home, is too big since the kids are gone, and will begin selling their big houses so they can move to a more crime-free part of the country, small town America. Suddenly, the current retirement vehicles called the 401k in America or the superannuation funds in many Commonwealth countries will begin to shrink. They will shrink because they are subject to market fluctuation, which means they go up with the market and they come down with the market. Mutual funds will begin to liquidate their stocks in order to pay for the sell order from baby boomers needing to use the money for retirement. Baby boomer will suddenly be stuck with huge capital gains taxes from the gains occurred by these mutual funds and taxable to them on withdrawal. The capital gains will come from selling these overvalued stock at higher price, which the funds passes on to its member. Instead of cash, many baby boomers will be stuck with a tax bill for capital gains. They never receive. Remember, the taxman always gets the money first. Simultaneously, the wealth of millions of poorer baby boomer will begin to fail because poor people historically have worse health than affluent people. Medicare will be bankrupt and the cry for more government support will go in cities all across America. Add to this the eclipsing of America by China as the nation with the largest GNP and the advent of the European Monetary Union. I suspect that both wages and the price of goods will have to come down and our productivity must skyrocket in order to meet the challenges of these two large economic blocs. All this will happen by 2010, which is not too far away. The next great transfer of wealth will take place not by conspiracy, by ignorance. We are in the final gaps of the entitlement mentality of big government and the big business of the industrial age, and we are officially entering the information age. In 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. In my opinion, that event was as significant as the year 1492 when Columbus bumped into the America in his search for Asia. In some circles, 1492 was the official beginning of the industrial age. The end was marked in 1989. The rules have changed. History is a guide. My rich dad encouraged me to learn the game well. After I learned it well, then I could do what I want with what I knew. I write and teach out of concern and sense that more people need to know how to take care of themselves financially and not become dependent upon the government or a company for life support. I hope I am wrong about what I see coming down the road economically. Maybe government can keep making promises to take care of people, keep on raising taxes, and keep on going into greater depth. Maybe the stock market will always go up and never come down again, and maybe real estate prices will always go up, and your home will become your best investment, and maybe the millions of people will find happiness earning a minimum wage and be able to provide a good life for their family. Maybe this can all happen, but I don't think so. Not if history is any guide. Historically, if people live to be 75 years of age, they lived through two recessions and one depression. As a boomer, we have gone through two recessions, but we have not yet seen the depression. Maybe there will never be a depression again, but history does not say that. The reason may rich that had me read books on great capitalists and economist ways so that I could gain a longer view and a better perspective on where we have come from and where we are going. Just as there are waves on the ocean, there are great waves in market instead of the wind and sun driving the waves of the ocean. The waves of the financial markets are driven by two human emotions, greed and fear. I do not think that depressions are things of the past because we are all human beings, and we will always have those emotions of greed and fear. And when greed and fear collide and a person loses badly, and the next human emotion is depression. Depression is the made up of the two human emotions, angers and sadness. Angers with one self and sadness over the loss. Economic depressions are emotional depressions. People lose and they get depressed. Even though the economy overall may appear to be in great shape, there are millions of people who are in various stages of depression. They may have a job, but deep down they know they aren't getting ahead financially. They are angry at themselves and sad over their loss of time. Little do most know that they have been trapped by the industrial age idea. Find a safe, secure job and don't worry about the future. A great change and opportunity. We are entering into the era of tremendous change and opportunity. For some people, it will be the best of times, and for others, it will be the worst of times. President John Kennedy said, "A great change is at hand." Kennedy was a man who came from the BI side of the quadrant, and he tried desperately to evaluate the lives of those stocks in time warps. Unfortunately, millions of people are still in those times warps, following ideas in their heads that were handed down from ages past. Ideas such as go to school so you can find a secure job. Education is more important than ever before, but we need to teach people to think a little further than just looking for a secure job and expecting the company or the government to look after them. Once their working days are through, that is an industrial age idea. We aren't there anymore. Nobody said it was fair, for this is not a fair country. We are a free country. There are people who work hard, are smarter, are more driving for success, are more talented, or are more desirous of the good life than others. We are free to pursue those ambition if we have the determination. Yet every time somebody does better, some people say it is unfair. The same people think it would be fair if the rich share with the poor? Well, nobody said it was fair. And the more we try to make things fair, the less free we become. When someone say to me that there is a racial discrimination or a glass ceiling, I agree with them. I know such thing exists. I personally detest my kind of discrimination, and being of Japanese ancestry, I have experienced discrimination firsthand. On the left side of the quadrant, discrimination does exist, especially in companies. Your looks, your schools, whether you're white or black or brown or yellow or are made of are male or female, all of those things count on the left side of the quadrant, but they do not count on the right side of the quadrant. The right side is concerned not with fairness or security, but with freedom and the love of the game. If you want to play the game on the right side, the players will welcome you. If you play or and win, fine, they will welcome you even more and ask you for your secret. If you play and lose, they will gladly take all your money, but don't complain or blame someone else for your failures. That is not the way the game is played on the right side of the quadrant. It is not meant to be fair. Being fair is not the name of the game. So why does government leave the BI side alone? In reality, government do not leave the BI side alone. It is more than the BI side has some ways of escaping and hiding well. In Rich Dad Poor Dad, I talk about the power of corporation. One big reason the rich keep more of their wealth is simply because they operate as corporate bodies and not human bodies. A human body needs a passport to go from country to country. A corporate body does not. A corporate body travels the world freely and often often work freely. A human body needs to register with the government, and in America, they need a green card to work. A corporate body does not. While government would like to take more money from corporate bodies, they realize that if they pass abusive tax law, the corporate bodies will take both their money and their jobs to some other country. In the industrial age, people talk about offshore as a country. The rich have always sought tax haven where their money would be treated kindly. Today, offshore is not a country; it is a cyberspace. Money being an idea and invisible can now hide in the invisible, or at least out of sight from the human eye. Soon it is not already being done. People will do their banking on a geosynchronous satellite orbiting in space, free from any law, or they may choose to operate in a country whose laws are more favorable to rich people. In Rich Dad Poor Dad, I wrote that corporation became popular at the start of the industrial age, just after Columbus discovered a new world filled with riches. Each time the rich sent a vessel out to sea, they were at risk because if the ship did not come back, the rich did not want to be indebted to the families of the sailor who died. So corporations were formed for legal protection and to limit the risk of loss to the amount of money venture and not beyond that. So the rich risk only their money and the crews risk their life. Not much has changed since then. Whenever I travel in the world, the people I deal with primarily deal in the manner as employees of their own corporation. In theory, they own nothing and really do not exist as private citizens. They exist as officers of their rich corporation, but as private citizens, they own nothing. And whenever I go to the work, I meet people who tell me, you can't do that in this country, that is against the law. Little do most people realize that most countries' laws in the Western world are similar. They may use different words to describe the same things, but in principle, their laws are pretty much the same. I recommend that if people you at least consider being an employee of your own corporation. It is especially advisable for high income S and for Bs even if they own franchises or earn their income from network marketing. Seek advice from competent financial advisor. They can help you choose and implement the best structure for your particular situation. There are two kinds of laws. One, on the surface, it seems as there are laws for the rich and there are laws for everyone else. But in reality, the laws are the same. The only difference is the rich use the laws to their advantage while the poor and middle class do not. That is the fundamental difference. The laws are the same, they are written for everyone, and I strongly suggest you hire smart advisors and obey the laws. It's too easy to make money legally rather than break the laws and wind up in jail. Besides, your legal advisors will serve as your early warning system for upcoming law change, and when law change, wealth changes hand. Two choices. One advantage of living in a free society is the freedom to make choices. In my opinion, there are two big choices, the choices of security and the choices of freedom. If you choose security, there is a huge price to pay for the security in the form of excessive taxes and punishing interest payments. If you choose freedom, then you need to learn the whole game and then play the game. It is your choice which quadrant you want to play the game from. One advantage of living a free society is the freedom to make choices. In my opinion, there are two big choices, the choice of security and the choice of freedom. If you choose security, there is a huge price to pay for the security in the form of excessive taxes and punishing interest payment. If you choose freedom, then you need to learn the whole game and then play the game. It is your choice which quadrant you want to play the game from. Part 1 of this book defined the specific of the cash flow quadrant, while part 2 has focused on developing the mindset and attitude of someone who chooses the right side of the quadrant. So now you should understand where you are currently in the quadrant as well as have an idea of where you want to be. You also should have a better understanding of the mental process and mindset of the operating from the right side of the quadrant. Author note: in 1943, the US began taxing all working America via payroll deduction. In other words, the government got paid before people in the E quadrant got paid. Anyone who was purely an E had little escape from the government. It also meant that instead of only the rich being taxed, which was the hope of the 16th Amendment, is now meant anyone on the left side of the quadrant got taxed, rich or poor. As stated earlier, the lowest paid in America today pay more in taxes as a percentage of total income than the rich and the middle class. In 1986, the Tax Reform Act went after the highly paid professionals in the S quadrant. The act specifically listed doctors, lawyers, architects, dentists, engineers, and the other such professions and made it difficult, if not possible, for them to shelter their income the way that the rich can do in the B and I quadrant. These professionals were forced to operate their business through S corporation instead of through C corporation or pay a tax penalty. The rich do not pay this penalty income for these highly compensated professional is then passed through the S corporation and tax at the highest individual tax rate possible. They don't have the opportunity to shelter their income through detection allowed to C corporation, and at the same time the law was changed to force all S corporation to have a calendar year end. This again forced all income to be taxed at the highest rate. When I was discussing the change recently with my personal CPA, she reminded me that the biggest shock to newly self employed people generally comes at the end of their first business year when they realize that the biggest tax they are paying is the self employment tax. This tax is double for S or self employed over what they paid as E or employee, and based or it is calculated based on income before the individual can detect any itemized detection or personal exemption. It is possible for a self-employed person to have no taxable income. Yes, yet is still owe self-employment tax. Corporation, on the other hand, do not pay self-employment tax. In 1986, Tax Reform Act also effectively pushed the E's and S's of America out of the real estate as investment and into paper assets such as stocks and mutual funds. Once the downsizing began, millions not only left felt secure, Millions not only felt less secure about their jobs, they also felt less secure about their retirement simply because they were basing their future financial well being upon paper assets subject to the ups and downs of the market. The 1986 Tax Reform Act also appears to have had the intention of shutting down the smaller community bank in America and shifting all banking to large nation bank. I suspect that the reason this was done was so that America could compete with the large bank of Germany and Japan. If that was the intent, it was successful. Today in America, banking is less personal and purely by the numbers, the net result being that it is harder for certain classes of people to qualify for home loans instead of a small town's banker knowing you by your character. Today, a central computer spits your name out if you don't meet its impersonal qualification requirement.